Wrestling fans, thank you so much for tuning in to Wrestling Changed My Life. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a rating and a review. The more we get, the more this show is bubbled up to wrestling fans just like you.
After the Olympic trials, we had the Olympic training camps, and Brands comes into Greco practice. He goes, you got to teach me how to gut wrench someone.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if they gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast, presented by Spartan Combat. Go to SpartanCombat.com to shop gear for the great Yanni Diakomahalis. All right, folks, today's guest is Dennis Hall, 1995 world champion, 1996 Olympic silver medalist, one of the most decorated Greco-Roman American wrestlers of all time. And Dennis is in rare form for this interview, folks. This might be an all-time episode. I hope you enjoy it. Fan of the week goes to our good friend Matt Sedevy. That's at Matt Sedevy on Twitter. Thank you so much for the support, Matt. We appreciate it. As always, Wrestling Changed My Life, proudly presented by Spartan Combat. Now let's get to the episode with the great Dennis Hall. Dennis Hall, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
It's an honor, and I am so excited to get into this. Normally, I plan out 2 or 3 topics to hit on. I got a sheet of 11 things I got to ask you about. I doubt we'll get to any of them, but to most of them. But man, let's just start. 1990, you're in Madison, Wisconsin. You make a world team and decide to give back your scholarship. Walk us through what all happened there.
It was a tough decision. When I signed with the Badgers, we had Andy Ryan as the head coach. We had Dave Schultz and John Azevedo as the assistant. And I get to school in June to go through the orientation and all that stuff. And Keith Davison, good friend of mine, tells me, hey, he goes, did you hear that Schultz and Azevedo are gone? I'm like, no. And I'm in Wisconsin, which is crazy. It was quiet. So I hadn't heard that. And Schultz, of course, left, I believe, for Foxcatcher at that time. And then Azevedo just headed back to California. And so I'm like, okay, I liked Andy. Andy was a good dude. So I went to school my freshman year. I ended up wrestling and redshirting my freshman year. Paul Walker, good friend of mine from Illinois, but then now he's down in Florida, was really good at Greco and helped me out quite a bit during the season. So I was ready for the U.S. Open. I ended up redshirting my freshman year and went to the U.S. Open. I only wrestled Greco. I didn't wrestle freestyle there like the coaches wanted me to do, but wrestled Greco. I ended up 3rd place, and that qualified me for the World Team Trials. And I made the go down to Cedar Falls, Iowa. My first 2 out of 3 is against Anthony Amato, who was a 1988 Olympian. And he beats me first match. I remember calling Andy Ryan. He didn't even come to watch me. He's probably busy or something. But I remember calling him. I say, I think I can beat him the next two. Because it was back then, it was 3 matches for the guy that won the mini tournament, 3 matches. And then you had to wrestle the second place, third place guy, 2 matches, and then the champion from the open 3 matches. So it was a long haul. But
wow.
I tell him I can beat him, and he's like, just go out there and wrestle hard. And that's what I did. And in the second match, Anthony ended up blowing out his knee, and I didn't want to win that way, but you know what? It was what it was. I feel bad because it definitely hampered the rest of his career. But then I ended up going on beating the number 2 guy at nationals, and then the national champion, Bam Pastelnik. He's a great competitor too. So I made my first world team, and I'm training back at UW after making a world team. And I registered for classes for the fall, and I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm going to pass being gone, because I was going to wrestle in the world championships and then the World Cup. And I'm like, I don't think I can do it. And
how long were you going to have to be gone for that?
About 8 weeks. So I talked to Andy. I said, hey, can we do a petition, petition the NCAA for a semester off? He goes, yeah. So we petitioned the NCAA. The NCAA denies my petition. They said, well, if it was a junior or a university age group world championships, we'd let you do it, which is such a joke. The NCAA is a freaking joke.
You're like, I'm above that level.
Exactly.
It's like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. So when they told me that I had to go to school full time and pass all the credits, I just talked to some of my good buddies, and I said, what the hell would you guys do? And they're like, what's your heart telling you to do? And at that point, my heart was telling me to chase the Olympics and the World Championship. So I remember the day walking into the Badgers wrestling room. Andy was in there working out with some guys, and I waited till he was done. And I'm like, hey, I want to get back my scholarship. I don't want to keep a scholarship from somebody that could use it. I'm going to go train Greco full time. And he's like, yeah, you're a quitter and you're never going to get there. And that was part of my motivation for doing what I did. Trust me on that.
Wow.
But, he was pissed. I see his point of view. He had a guy that could place in the NCAAs, if not win it. The previous year at the Northern Open, I wrestled Brands, Terry, and lost 7-5 to him. So, I was right there. I think he won the NCAAs that year, if I remember correctly. But
how loaded was that Northern Open back in those days?
It was pretty good. It was a tough tournament, man. You had Iowa State, you had Nebraska, Minnesota, I believe Michigan was there, Illinois, and Wisconsin. So it was a tough tournament.
Alan Freed tells me a story about he drove up there to wrestle Brands when Freed was redshirting, and he hit a deer on the way up or something.
doesn't surprise me.
Crazy story.
A lot of them. Yeah.
So you tell the coach, and I just got to make one quick aside. Bam Pastelnik is a close family friend, and I grew up where he was coaching. So I'd be remiss without giving a shout out to Bam Pastelnik.
He's a great dude. I love him. Good guy.
So you tell coach, I'm done. I'm turning in my scholarship. My first question was, where did you go? Like, did you go to Colorado to train, or what'd you do?
I just kind of hodgepodged it. I went out by my brother for a while. I went out at Adams State. Then I came back and I'd go down to Marquette when Marquette still had their wrestling program, because when I left, the coach said, well, he goes, you got to find a new place to train. He goes, you can't train in the room anymore. So I'm like, okay. Went up to Minnesota a little bit, to their Storm, what's Storm now. Went to Stevens Point, Wisconsin. My ex-wife was going to school there at the time, and I, she said, we got some guys that would at least give you a workout. So I came up here, and I've been up here ever since. It worked out pretty well. The coaches up here were fantastic. They'd allow me to work with guys, when I needed to, and the guys benefited from it, helped produce a lot of D3 All-Americans for them.
So that's where your home base was for all those years.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the Greco capital of the world, I can tell you that. So that was the challenging part, but the coaches at the university allowed me to bring in foreign training partners all the time to help me, and between their guys and the foreigners, it was a good situation.
And I want to talk about some of the guys you brought in because, I've heard you say, why would you go train in Europe where you have to pay for a hotel, all of that when you can just have someone come to you,
Yeah. I mean, currently right now I'm working on trying to get a couple guys. Matt Linland doesn't know it, but I'm trying to get a couple guys. I got a couple sons that wrestle Greco, and I got a real good training partner for my sons at the club that I coach. And we're actually, I was just talking to a guy from Iran this probably about 10 o'clock this morning, because he's good friends with a guy from Tajikistan from the Federation. And that guy called him and then gave him my number, and then tried getting the English barrier broken down a little bit to tell me. I knew what I needed to do, but I got to call Matt Linland and tell them I want to bring over. And they said if USA Wrestling sends a request for a visa, they'll approve it. So that's on my list after this.
Love it. Well, we're going to dive into all of that because, after you told coach you weren't coming back to Wisconsin, you go to the 1990 Worlds, and fact check me on this, but I understand between that and the World Cup, you had like a 5-match losing streak.
Yeah, it sucked. It was horrible.
Were you having some doubts about your decision at that point?
Oh, I had huge doubts. I mean, I'm up in my hotel room in Gothenburg, Sweden. It's a beautiful city. And I'm up there bawling like a little baby. I'm thinking, hey, man, is there any way I can get my scholarship back? Because this ain't working too well. And luckily, I had a coach that cared about me. Dan Chandler, I don't know if he'd remember this, but I sure in the hell do. He knocks on my door the night after the first day of competition, and he goes, I invited him, and he sees that I've been crying a little bit, and he goes, Dennis, he goes, I know what's wrong. I go, I'm sure glad you do, because I haven't got a clue. And he goes, you're giving these guys way too much respect. The way you wrestle in the States is so different from the way you're wrestling these guys. He goes, in the States, you don't care. You believe you can beat the guys. He goes, you got to go out there tomorrow and just get after these guys and be physical and create a street fight with them. And that's all he said. And he goes, okay, we'll see you in the morning. And so I think about that for the next hour. And he was right. Next morning, I just wanted to make it a battle. And I ended up beating 2 guys the next day. I ended up beating a guy that won the World Cup from Sweden. And it was a wild match. I still got the newspaper somewhere. I don't know what the hell it says, but I'd like to get it interpreted someday. But it had me with a picture of me having their guy on his back, and they interviewed me, and I don't remember what I said.
It's so cool to have like those moments in your mind like that, because at the moment you're probably thinking life couldn't get any worse, and then the next day it already starts to turn around.
It definitely did. I know a lot of guys that struggle internationally, especially in Greco, and the more losses you take until there's a defining moment in your career that changes your outlook, it's tough to battle. It just eats at you.
What was it bigger?
I'm going to say one thing too. It doesn't help that our media in the U.S. doesn't understand how tough Greco is overseas.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I had McAfari on recently, and he says, and again, you're going to be fact checking me all day here. He says that in other countries, the best wrestlers go Greco as opposed to freestyle.
100%. 100%.
That is just so hard to conceptualize for most people, including myself.
The thing is, what people got to understand is you got to understand center of gravity and weight distribution and everything. I mean, it's almost complete physics when you're wrestling Greco. So, and I'm not saying freestyle is easy. It's not. I've wrestled it a ton. But the Greco, to try and break a guy's position when you can't touch a leg and fake a shot, it's tough.
What's like the deciding factor in some of those super elite Greco guys that we're seeing now?
One, I think the biggest thing is center of gravity control. Our guys are doing we need to work on that. We got to understand the feel part of the sport. Right now, our guys lean way more than we should be leaning. If they could straighten up a little bit, I think we'd get more success. It's not that our guys aren't fighters. I just think they don't understand why we're getting beat, and it's driving me crazy. That's why I'm actually working with a bunch of younger guys right now, trying to look forward to 2024, 2028.
The Dennis Hall RTC, baby. Stevens Point.
Trying.
We need it. Now, we were talking about 1990, and that was a big turning point for you. What was bigger, though, 1990 or when you lost to the Cuban in 93?
The Cuban was a heart check too, man. It was crazy. I get to the world championships, and back then, if you lost in the quarters, you were out.
What kind of crazy rule is that? You win your first one, you win your second, you're out?
Exactly. It was insane, And I remember winning my first match, and then the coaches, or before my match, they asked me, hey, basically, do you want to throw the match? And I'm like, screw you. I ain't throwing it, but at the same time, that put some doubt in my mind, and I went out, I wrestled cautious against a Cuban. I didn't go out there and throw the kitchen sink at him. And I ended up losing that match by a point. And I remember coming off the mat. My goal was to keep it close and score in the last minute and win. And that didn't happen. And I come off the mat, I'm not exhausted, and I'm pissed off. And, my chance of winning a world medal just went down the drain. I'm done. And the coaches, they didn't say much. They were just watching other guys that were competing still. And I get back home, and my father-in-law and I are going up to some land in Park Falls, Wisconsin. They're want to look at some land on a flowage. And we're on our way up there, and he goes, hey, Dennis, he goes, how do you support your wife? I go, through wrestling. I said, I get $650 a month back then, which is a joke. I said, I run wrestling clubs and I do camps. I said, that's all I got time for. I can't do a regular job. There's no way in train. And he goes, well, is there any way you can make more money from USA Wrestling? I go, yeah. I said, if you win a medal, you make decent money. I said, but, it's tough. He goes, well, look at your training. He goes, I put in 50 to 60 hours a week to support my family. I'm like, okay.
What were you doing? Like 3 hours a day workouts, or 2 hours a day, something like that?
About four, but what I ended up doing is starting doing more conditioning. I said I could get in better shape for sure. I'm in good shape, but I could get in better shape. I just thought about a lot of different things, and and kind of laid out a plan. And I said, I'm winning a medal next year. That's when I set it in my mind. It's podium or bust. And, that was a turning point when he checked me on if I was doing what I needed to do. And that was probably one of the best trips that I've taken with somebody that wasn't a wrestler.
And so what it was like, you're thinking, man, I thought I was doing enough, but maybe I'm not doing enough. And so you started ramping up your training pretty drastically after
100%. Exactly. Every practice mattered. Every run mattered. Everything I did was for winning instead of just, a lot of athletes, they get you. And I know you, as an athlete, you get almost complacent with your training sometimes, and you're just going through the motions instead of, enjoying it, doing it because you love it and you want to be the best. And that's what changed in me that day.
And you got to share what your daily regiment was from morning to sunset, what you were doing back then.
It was getting up at, 7:00 in the morning, getting to the gym or to the weight room or the track. And I'd work out for an hour, and I'd take a couple hours off, and then I'd come back in about 11:00, and I'd do a drill workout where I was just working on technique, working on the little things that make a big difference, just trying to get my timing down, trying to get quicker hands, quicker feet, getting better turns, better defense. Those were good workouts. I'd do that for an hour and then come back to my house, relax for a little bit. And then if I was working out with the university, I'd come back in about 3:00 and I'd get done probably 5:30, 6:00. And then after that, a lot of times I'd go run a mile hard because that's the length of a wrestling match. Mm-hmm. I'm not a sprinter. I'd sprint that mile as hard as I could, and then after that, I'd do a lifeline workout with the handles, and that was probably a good 35 to 40-minute workout. And that was a huge difference in just believing in myself.
I was going to say, outside of the physical benefits, the mental confidence you must have had, knowing that that's what you were doing every day, must have been game-changing.
Yeah, it was. And you know what? When you're doing everything possible to win, and when you're not. And guys that accept losing are the guys that ain't doing everything they can do. And I'm not saying you have to go ballistic if you lose, but it should piss you off and it should burn deep. Every loss I took sucked. Mm-hmm. I never was happy with losing. And, when you're training that hard, it just gives you the confidence. I remember being in the Olympic Training Center, and after the Greco practice, I'm the last guy out of the room. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why I was winning. Why I got to the level I got to.
Yeah, and to your point, after 93, where you had that match with the Cuban, you come back and get a bronze. Then in 95, when the rest of the world's watching freestyle in the U.S., you're overseas at the 95 World Championships. Talk about the path you had to get to that gold medal, because it's ridiculous.
It is. It was a pretty tough path. My first match, it was funny because Brandon Paulson and he was my training partner for that year. And we had been training all year together. And I told him, I said, I'd like to get Ignatenko first round. And back then they didn't have it on flow or track wrestling. It was, paper stuff, and you didn't know who you had. And so I weigh in, and I end up drawing Ignatenko from Russia. He's a world champion from Russia. A lot of medals. I don't even know how many medals the guy has, but up to that point, I think I scored on him one time before that. Wow. And I had wrestled him a few times, and he was tough, but I just wanted to grind him out and get him early. Why, because, if I could get him early after the weight cut, probably better. So that was my thought process with him. I ended up beating him in overtime, and he tried a gut wrench on me. I ended up stepping over and catching him on his back, and finally they stopped the match after I kind of let him go back to his base because I knew I won. Then the next match, but a crazy story. This is the truth. After my first match with Ignatenko, they tell me, you're done for the session. So I have my bag on, my shoulder, in my tennies, I have 1 foot on the bus. And Mitchell comes up and he goes, you have another match. They called you to the mat. I'm like, so I run back in. I strip down right at Matt's side. I got my briefs on. I throw my shoes on. I don't even get to warm up. Usually I do a full warm up before every match. I go out there. I wrestle this guy from Sweden is originally from Greece. He ended up moving to Sweden. I don't know how he did that, but he wrestled at the weight above me the year before. So he was big too.
Wow. And
I ended up not even getting a warm up. I beat him by a point in regulation. So I squeaked by that match. Then my next match is against Rafat Yildiz, the German, who's a 2-time world champ, Olympic silver medalist from 92. And I don't know how many medals he has, but he has a good amount of medals. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, I'm sure, someday, if he isn't already. But he gut wrenches me. He's on top of me, and he puts his head down by my side, and I clamp his head to my side with my lats, and he must have knew that I would probably fall for it. Well, he drives me forward, gets me gut wrenched, and I'm down 3-1, and there's like 20 some seconds left, and I had him in a front headlock and was trying to throw him. He's trying to get out of bounds to step out before I get the throw. He steps out, and then he takes a timeout. And I look over to my corner, and Rob Herman's sitting in my corner, and I look over, and he's kind of got his head down, and I'm like, that sucks. So I look over to where Dan Chandler and another coach was standing, and they're watching the match beside my match. And I'm looking for these guys. I'm looking at these guys for anything. What do you see?
Because you're down 3-1 with 18 seconds
3-1, exactly.
And they think it's over.
Yep. And I quick look up to the stands, and all my teammates kind of look down. And I'm like, okay, the fat lady hasn't sang yet. So I quick say, okay, I'm going to lean my head a little bit, and I'm going to do a high dive right off the whistle. I'm going to the body. And I did exactly that. I got in, got a great lock, and I drove him straight to his back and touch-balled him. And pinned him. I don't even know how much time was left, but it wasn't much. And so that put me in the semifinals of the World Championships against Agassi Manoukian. And I had wrestled Agassi earlier in that year, and he had beaten me 7-5. He had reverse lifted me one time, got me up, slammed me down, and then I defended. He got me up again on his shoulder. Somehow I defended the second lift, and he only got one. And make a long story short, I ended up losing that match 7-5. Well, at the world team camps and all this times Paulson and I were training, Paulson had a good reverse lift. So I made him do it until I figured out a reverse lift defense. And the reverse lift defense was whatever side the guy's setting up on, turn and seal off on the other side and don't let him get his lock. Well, I'm at the wrestling Agassi, and they put me down first like they always do to Americans. And Agassi gets on top, gets ready to try his reverse lift. He can't get his lock. So we get back up, they blow the whistle, and I remember watching him get back up to his feet, And he walks back to the center with his head down. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And it wasn't a good day for him after that. I ended up beating him 8-0. I was attacking right at the end, trying to attack him, but I didn't get it. And beat him 8-0. And that put me in the finals against Melnichenko. Agassi was a tough dude. He was a 93 world champ. I forgot to mention that. In the 93 worlds, he broke 5 guys' ribs with his reverse lift and teched everybody.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
So this is just to get to the finals.
Yeah, that was to get to the finals. I beat him.
How legit was the guy you had in the finals?
He was, I think, 2 or 3 world championships, maybe a silver Olympic champion. Up to that point, he was defending world champion. So he won the worlds a year before. And I think he teched Ignatenko in the finals that year, I believe.
Jeez, so deep.
Yeah.
So how many world champs were in that weight? 4 or 5?
Shit, more than that. There, you had Anhan Ban, who was Olympic champion from 92. He was in the weight class. You had Eroglu from Turkey, who ended up going up a weight class in 2 years and won the weight class at 62 kilos. He's like a 2-time world champ from Turkey. I know there's one other world champ that I'm forgetting, but so it was deep. It was crazy deep.
What happened in the finals?
Melnichenko got actually, I don't know if I got him put down first or if he got me put down first. It's a crazy story. In 1991, I wrestled Melnichenko at the Espoir World Championships. He ended up teching me in like a minute 20-some or minute 30. I don't know.
Yeah.
He had a great lift, unbelievable not straddle, but not what are they? Why was my brain going dead? Straight lift where it's a swing lift. And he lifted me twice, teched me real quick. So that year I brought over, I believe, Ivan Ivanov's brother. I know it was his brother, but I think it was that year I brought him over to help me defend Melnichenko's lift, because he lifted a lot like Melnichenko. And talk about a story. I'm in working out with Stefan Ivanov, and we're working on lift defense. And I swear I must have been thrown 30 times that day. And I grabbed the closest thing next to me, which wasn't him, which was a chair, and I threw it halfway down the wrestling room, and I walked out of the room that day, and I'm like, we're coming back tomorrow. I can't take any more abuse today. And so I left the room. We come back tomorrow. We worked on it. I started figuring it out and ended up working out because he couldn't lift me at the World Championships that year. And anyway, I gut wrenched Melnichenko for a 2-point. I had a trapped arm, but he got his arm out. And then I got put down. He gets a 1-point gut. Then I think they put me down later in the match, and he gets a 1-point gut. And because I had a 2-point, he had 2 1-points. I won the Worlds because it was 2-2.
And just the second American to ever win the World Championships, right?
Yeah, second. Yep.
Talk about just like that night. I mean, what do you remember from that night after you had won and it was in the tank?
It was cool. I remember being on the podium and feeling my brother's presence at the tournament. My brother had passed away in 1988 from a drinking and driving crash. And I just remember being on the podium and feeling him and knowing he's okay. So that was a hell of an experience right there in itself. Then just going out in Prague, because it was in Prague, and people on the street came up and knew who I was, which was unbelievable. They congratulated me, and here in the United States, nobody knows who I am, which is kind of funny. Yeah. Not funny, but sad. So, a lot of people, it was on TV over there. It was a big deal. It was cool and had fun. Remember going out with the guys and just, having some fun.
For
It was a
sure.
good time.
I mean, what a journey just from 93 to that point, but even obviously your whole life leading up to that. I know you wrestled in a ton more world championships and were close to medaling in like 97, just a real a screw job, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that tournament pisses me off to this day.
I figured it did. So those, that's, again, there's so many world championships that you were in, and I had to hit on 93 and 95. Yep. Olympic trials, you were in a ton of them. I got to go back to 92. Who was Frank Firmino, and what the heck was going on back then?
Frank was a stud, man. He was on the 84 Olympic team. Frank had a gut wrench from hell. And they changed he was fifth in the 84 Olympics. Okay. He wrestled up at 136 and a half in 1990, started making a drop in 91. He beat me in 91. So I ended up number 2 in the country in 91, beat me 2 straight. And then in 92, it was best 2 out of 3. I ended up wrestling him. But right before the trials, they changed the rules where there was no forced parterre. So it was basically on your feet unless you scored a takedown. And I ended up scoring on the feet. I don't remember. I think I lat dropped him one time, if I remember correctly. But I scored all my points from the feet. And he wasn't able to score on me on the feet. I ended up winning 2 matches straight. And I supposedly make the Olympic team. There's a whole story. I don't know if you heard it.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. So you win the Olympic trials, and they say, hey, we'll give you the warm-ups, but no way in hell are you wrestling in Barcelona.
Yep. They go, Frank's going to wrestle in Barcelona. And I had warned USA Wrestling previously that I had planned on winning the trials. And I said, you got to have a wrestle off. They sent Frank's name in as the guy that if we get a wild card that he gets to wrestle.
Even though you won the trials?
They did that like a month and a half before the trials. And I was bitching at him saying, we got to host the trials early.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they had me on record, and that's why things changed. So I end up beating Frank in 2 matches straight. And I make the team, and they tell me to get in a picture. And I'm like, why the hell you putting me in the picture if you're going to let Frank wrestle? I said, you know what? Frank goes in the picture. And finally they're like, get in the picture. And I get in the picture. And at that point, Frank's supposedly going to be wrestling in the Olympics if I don't stand up for myself. So I go back home. I'm fuming. I'm pissed off. And I call a lawyer from Marquette. And this guy's a sports lawyer. And I call him. I said, what do I have? He goes, you got a case. He goes, you know what? He goes, let me deal with these guys. So he calls USA Wrestling and lets them know that we're going to be filing if they don't change the name. Within 1 day, they changed the name on the petition. But before that, they told me they couldn't do it.
It's crazy because think about you winning the trials. That whole tournament was a black cloud for you because of all the nonsense, when really it should have been the highest point of your life. Yeah, exactly.
100%.
So you go to Barcelona though, right? Obviously.
Yeah, I went to Barcelona, wrestled in the 92, ended up, I think, 8th place, if I recall.
I mean, what was that experience like? As a 21-year-old, you're there, you're hanging out with all the guys. The freestyle team had a hell of a team. I mean,
yeah, they did. Our Greco team actually did well. We had a couple medals. Dennis Kozlowski and then Rodney Smith both medaled for the Greco. So it was neat watching that. Neat. I just remember being on opening ceremonies field. I'm sitting next to all the wrestlers, and we're just shooting the shit. And I'm sitting next to John Smith, and he goes, Dennis, he goes, are you nervous? And I'm like, hell, John knew who I was. That's pretty cool, because he's a guy I looked up to, man. And he goes, "Are you nervous?" I go, "No." He goes, "Well," he goes, "just wait." Well, about an hour later, they light the torch and the crowd goes crazy. And right at that point, I'm like, holy shit, I'm at the Olympic Games and I'm going to be competing. And that's when I got nervous. So, yeah, he was right. I would get nervous.
Thanks, John. Right?
Exactly. For sure.
How do you compare and contrast that Barcelona games, your first games, to 96 home court advantage?
96 was unbelievable. Being in the United States, I was wrestling on the first day of competition, first and second day. And, the difference is in 92, there wasn't any pressure. And in 96, I was expected to win it. The neat thing, what kind of was a good turning point too, was after 92, they take all Olympians that made the Olympic team and you get to go out and meet the president of the United States and have a luncheon with them and get your picture taken with them. And I remember being in the White House and sitting on a chair and just watching all these athletes go by with their medals. And at that point, I said, there's no way I'm getting done with my Olympic career without a medal. And that was a turning point too, because it made it real for me. And it made me, because I felt like a loser because I didn't have a medal on my neck, and a lot of them, not everybody, but a lot of them had medals. And that's when I said, I'm coming back here in 96 with one around my neck. And
let's go, baby.
It's a motivator. Exactly.
Let's go. I mean, there's nothing worse than being somewhere and you feel like you're left out, whether it's like you come back for the high school homecoming when you're a year out of college or any of that, or when you're a year out of high school, you just feel like you don't belong. There's no worse feeling,
Yeah.
And you felt that way in the White House.
I felt that way. Exactly. I felt like I let my country down and I didn't do my job.
And so you return with a vengeance, 96, you get a silver. A lot of guys say there's no solace in silver. Are you one of those people, or were you able to have some perspective and be proud of the silver?
I wanted to throw the son of a bitch away. I mean, to be honest, I didn't work for that. Looking back now, I like it. I appreciate it now. But at that point, I would have given it to a kid at that point. It didn't matter to me. My goal was to win it. And, it sounds like a bad sport, but, all the time and energy and everything, it sucked. It was, first place and third place guys are always smiling on the podium. The second place guy probably wants to kill the first place guy. Just saying.
I appreciate the candor, and I know that's how you operate, man. You're that refuse to lose attitude. We've all heard that in association with your just your mentality and your approach. But if you think about that run, 94 bronze medal, 95 world champ, 96 Olympic silver, and then 97, you would have been a bronze medalist if the travesty wouldn't have happened. So, I mean, that's a really remarkable run if you look back on it.
No, it is. It was a crazy run. And, I think, if I could have kept more partners around me, I think I could have been more successful throughout the rest of my career. But it was just hard. A lot of your partners ended up going, or my partners ended up going other places to train. And, it got tougher as I got a little bit older. And then I had my first son right after the 96 Olympics. And, I think when I saw my son being born, I think it changed me just enough to make me realize that there's more to life than wrestling. And I don't want to admit it, but it's just, there's something about it when you're a dad.
And before that, Dennis Hall.
Before that, I was a killer.
Oh my! I mean, everything I've found and read points directly to that. Talk about another killer, Terry Brands. He's been in your corner a lot. When did you start training with him?
I started, it was funny, after the Olympic trials, we had the Olympic training camps, and Brands comes into Greco practice. He goes, Hall, he goes, you got to teach me how to gut wrench someone. I'm like, okay. So up to that point, the last or couple experiences, after he beat me 7-5 at the Northern Open, he runs off. The other thing is, I got to say this, the match is over. He pushes his hand on my back and one on my head and kind of shoves my face into the mat and runs back to the center, and then runs off the mat cussing because he's pissed off he didn't beat me by more. And so that's my experience with him until he says, hey, you got to teach me how to defend a gut wrench and gut wrench. So we started training, and we talked about his trials, and I felt horrible for him.
So this is 96?
96.
So he's in a raw spot at this point.
Yeah. I'm like, how you doing? He's like, good. He goes, I don't even want to be here. And we just started talking, and, we kind of clicked, man. Same mindset, same mold. And, then we started training together. He'd come up by me, I'd go down by him, and, we just had each other's back, and it was just the right mindset. And, he struggled a little bit in 99 and 2000 with this mental frame of mind. And at that point, I was in his corner. I just told him, you got to do what your body and your heart's telling you to do. And, it was a wild time for him. And I think a lot of it was pressure and trying to be the best in the world and win that Olympic medal. He had the world titles at that time. So his goal was to be Olympic champ, just like everybody. Everybody remembers Olympic champions. They don't necessarily remember the guys that won a world title.
Which is crazy because the world's in many ways is deeper and
tough. It can be tougher.
Can be. When you say he was struggling with his frame of mind, how do you mean by that?
He had passed out when he was going up to Winnipeg, Canada. He was at a hotel. He passed out right outside the sauna, and he was afraid that he'd possibly die trying to make weight, or that something bad was going to happen. So his mindset was messed up.
Wow.
And he was really concerned. In 1999, he ended up not wrestling at the World Championships that year, gave up his spot, just couldn't do it mentally. So he gets the things with the mental blocks, and I get it too, it's tough. But I just I stood by his side, and, I told him, I said, I don't give a shit what any of your coaches or, what your brother says. I said, you gotta get that mind right. And that's kind of where hopefully I helped him out a little bit.
And when you say you guys would work out together, were you wrestling freestyle? Was he wrestling Greco, or was it
we do a little bit of both, mostly Greco, but he wanted to learn how to defend upper body. So we do some freestyle, but a lot of parterre, a lot of working on guts and gut defense.
Yeah, I can't think of two guys who are more similar than you two, just in there scrapping. God.
Yeah, there were some crazy practices. It was good.
Now in 2000,
I'll tell you, nobody has hands like that guy. How heavy that guy can be with his hands is unbelievable.
Even compared to some of those Greco guys you go with?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I got snapped by him, my natural reaction was to punch him. And then I'm thinking, damn, he probably can punch back. I'm serious, because when he clubs you in the spot. He knows the spot. And I figured it out too, because I working with him, I'm like, where the hell are you snapping me? Because every time you snap me, I get a shot of electricity from the base of my neck down to my tailbone. I said, and I don't like it. So I got to figure it out. I mean, we're just clubbing the shit out of each other, trying to help me figure it out. Wow. So it was good.
So in 2000, he obviously comes through. He makes the team.
Yeah, makes a team, gets a bronze, and, it sucks, man. he could have won it, just one bad match or bad situation.
Yeah, Reza DeBeer had his leg up there, could have bailed out, and it went to his back, and yeah. But in 2000, though, you all of a sudden, you're like this Greco star, the best ever in the United States. This guy, Jim Grinwald, who you'd wrestled in high school.
Yeah.
He starts eking into the picture. Did you consider him a real threat going into 2000?
Yeah, I consider him a threat. The freaking schedule for guys that haven't qualified to wait, it's ridiculous what you got to go through. I mean, I had nationals, then I had the Pan Ams that I had to win. No, a lot of people don't know this story. I'm at the Pan Ams. It's me and the Cuban in the finals. The Cuban is a tough son of a bitch. He's an Olympic silver medalist in 2004. So he was just on his upswing. And Roberto Monzon. And I'm getting ready to wrestle the finals against Monzon. We're in Colombia where we haven't been outside our hotel except to go to practice because you're afraid to get kidnapped. I'm getting ready for the finals. I'm warming up with Brandon Paulson. He ends up hip tossing me, knocks me out cold. I have a concussion, but I got to wrestle the finals. I go out there, I wrestle Monzon. I don't know what the hell is going on in the match. Somehow I'm down by a point or something with, a short time left. From what I hear, I never saw the match. I need to get this match. But Monzon I must have looked crazy or something because he just gave me a takedown and gave up the match.
And you don't remember any of it?
I don't remember any of it because I had a concussion.
Jeez. I mean, you hear people talk about, your routine's out the window when you go overseas. When I hear about these Greco stories, it's to another level. You're in a hotel in Colombia. How the hell do you cut weight in a hotel? Like,
you go to the sauna. I always brought a bike everywhere I went to. So I always brought a bike with me, exercise bike.
How? I just checked it.
I paid $80 or whatever it was back then because there's no way in hell I was making weight by running. I hated running.
Wow. So this is all going on in between the Olympic trials in Dallas.
Yep. And then you got that, and you got a 3-week period till the final trials. And, I think I was just burnt out a little bit, but not only that, it was a bullshit call. And I'm going to say it the way I see it. I'm up 3-0 in the final of the best 2 out of 3. I'm up 3-0. I get to Grunwald's body. And I got him up off the mat, and miraculously, I go straight to my back. Okay?
Leg trip?
Leg trip. You can see the hook. Well, they're like, we can't tell how much pressure there was on your leg. Well, if you watch that video, and this is where USA Wrestling and I don't see eye to eye, and I don't give a rat's ass because you know what? I know what it's like to be ripped off. I believe it. Grunwald will say it was clean. I'll tell him he's full of shit to his face, and we'll be okay with each other. That's the way I am. He sees it one way. I see it one way. You know what? Watch the video. See what you see. But make a long story short, I get to his body. I got him up. If I throw him, match is over. There's no way he's coming back. If they call caution in 2 and put him down, I'm up 5-0. I didn't have to go to the body. I went to the body because I wanted to score points. Well, it bit me in the ass. I ended up getting hooked, and as I'm going to my back, you can hear me yell on the video, legs. I'm down in parterre bitching at the referee to call it and stop it, which I should have been defending, but I'm an idiot. I'll admit that part. That's where I screwed up. And he ends up getting on a gut wrench me or lift me or whatever. I ended up losing that match because I lost my mind. I wanted to kill somebody, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
So what match was that? 1 or 2?
That was the third and final match.
That was 3? Oh
yes.
My God.
And so I get done. I go back to the hotel. I'm walking and just I'm devastated, man. Because I felt like I was doing well, like I was peaking and getting ready, and then I'd finally have a training situation where I could actually train and not compete.
Yeah.
And he ends up, I think, doing well at the Olympics. Was a match or 2 away from winning a medal, and that it sucked. You're making, I think back then it was $350 a month. So, I didn't get to wrestle in the Olympics and try and win another medal,
Did you consider retiring?
No, I was pissed. I had a point to prove, I wanted to try. I knew I could make 4 more years, and I decided to try and make the 2004 Olympic team in Athens, where it all started. So I committed to that, and it was just a tough road. I was working construction 6-7 hours a day, and then training half-assed, because we didn't have sponsors, and it was tough. And then they changed weight classes. They bumped the weight class up to 60 some, and my best weight was 25 and a half, and I had to make a decision to either wrestle up where I wasn't cutting a ton, or drop weight. And I decided to drop in 03 after the 03 team trials. I said, I'm going down to 121 pounds.
What did Terry say when you told him?
He's like, do you think you can do it? I said, yeah, I can do it. He goes, okay, then do it.
Where were you starting from?
At that point, probably about 56.
Oof, my God.
35 pounds.
And I heard that you had the power bar diet, power bar in the morning, power bar at night. How many months out were you doing that? Or was it like? It
was like a 3-week stretch. 3 weeks. Yep.
Man.
A power bar in the morning, a perfect meal from Advocare for lunch, and then another power bar for dinner. And that was 3 weeks.
Did you ever like consider breaking, or you just pushed through with the weight?
You had to. I mean, once I made the team, or committed, I'm like, okay, I'm either going to die trying, or I'm going to make it and be a monster.
And you talk about making the team. I remember this like it was yesterday, because I was in 9th grade. My mom took me to the 04 Olympic trials for my birthday.
That's a sweet gift.
Sweet gift. RCA Dome. It was my first big event. I remember they had the stadium was cut off at the 50-yard line, and they had the warm-up area.
Yep.
And I would sneak back there and watch the guys warm up, and I'll never forget that event. And to this day, my mom reminds me of your match with Brandon Paulson. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. 18-minute marathon match. The craziest thing to me is that I don't think, let me know if I'm wrong in this, was it well established ahead of time that you would just wrestle until the end? Like there was no criteria, nothing?
No. This is where I got questions. Okay. In that match, he scored a 2-point and a 1-point. I scored a 3-point feet to back. You get where I'm going with this.
I get it, man. I get it. That's what I'm so confused about, because
they told me and Brandon when we're on the mat, and I'm crazy. I can't think straight when I'm wrestling. I look to my coaches for that type of stuff, and they tell me, hey, we're not going to decide the match. You guys, somebody's got to score a point. Looking back, it never should have been.
No.
Because of the criteria was not the same. But at that point, I didn't realize it. I remember probably in about 2015 or 16, maybe 17 even, I figure out in my wrestling club in Stevens Point. Me and guys are talking about that match in the room. And then finally it hits me that the criteria wasn't the same. I get up, I'm like, you got to hear this, guys, because I'm talking with buddies. And I call Brantz right away. As soon as it dawns on me, it never should have went into overtime. I call Brantz and I go, Brantz, I go, do you realize I never should have went into overtime? I think USA was trying to screw me again. And Brantz is like, he goes, who cares? He goes, that's the best match I ever wrestled. He goes, that is a match that everybody will remember. I go, yeah, but you don't get my point. And he goes, who cares? Shut up and let it go. And, you know, I let it go, but yet part of me wonders if there was another motive. Serious. I'm not kidding.
I mean, you've never seen another match ever that this happened where even Rulon Carellin at the end of 9, it was it. You know, so somehow it just happened though. And you come out on the winning end of it. I heard that like at the 9-minute mark when the refs tell you you're going to keep going. At that point, you mentally committed to going another hour. You know, I that's
set
so
my
savage.
Mental clock. I set my mental clock for an hour because Paulson and I used to do grind matches, and we might score 3 points in an hour. You know, so at that point, I set my mind for an hour, and I'm just like, okay, I ain't doing anything stupid. I'm just going to get on him and keep pulling on him and wear him out and get him to basically drop over until he gives me a point. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, we were attacking, both of us. There were a couple close scores at the edge of the mat with both of us earlier in overtime. And then finally at 16 minutes and 54 seconds, I had a 2-on-1, and I get him turned. I drive it across, and I get his hips turned, and I get his back, and I run him out of bounds. And I acted like I won. I didn't give the ref a chance to take away that point. I just ran over. I ripped Brand's head off, knocked him off the stage, ran around the stage, and jumped back up on the stage, and hug the cameraman. It's pretty pathetic if you see it. But
I watched it yesterday.
I don't know why I hugged him, but I hugged the cameraman, and then I saw Brandon, and I saw him just on the mat, and I go over to him and I give him a hug, and I tell him I love him. I said, I'm sorry. I had to do it, I said, you know what? We gave the crowd what they came here for. We gave them a hell of a match. And I said, I'm sorry. And then after that, I gave him a couple days, and I called him and asked him if he'd be my training partner. Because I knew he knew everybody at the weight class, and he'd be able to help me out with preparing, and he agreed to it. So that was cool.
One of the most epic matches of all time. I encourage everyone to go on YouTube and check that match out. Literally a 16-minute match, match 3, everything's on the line. It was just crazy. And there's so many other places we could go with your career, but the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Dennis, was in 2016, 2017, and I picked this up from the interview you did with the 5-point throw, which is amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
You were talking about kind of a conditioning program that you had started.
Yeah.
What are some of the fundamentals of that?
It's basically all center of gravity control, building your core. I was just, me and a buddy had developed it, and we developed it because I was getting pissed off coaching. I mean, to be honest, I was struggling coaching because I couldn't understand why the athletes couldn't get the stuff that I'm doing and teaching. And guys would be in a stance. let them be in there with their partners, and they can't do any of the things because they weren't strong enough. And me and a buddy, he was a place kicker. We ended up developing a program. He asked me what I did in my training, and I showed him a lot of the things that the foreigners taught me, and we put together this program.
What? I'm dying to know what stuff.
It's basically just basic base squat position. It's the athletic position, but your back is completely straight. And, you got 360 degrees of mobility because you're not front loaded on your toes, and one thing that I found out through working with him and developing this program is the use of leverage with your feet. Whatever is touching the mat on the mat has to be driving into the mat to give you strength and stability. And as a coach, I remember when I started wrestling back a long time ago, they always told us to be light on our feet and have our weight on our toes. And it's completely ass backwards. You do not want to do that. And I will go to the ends of the earth to get this knowledge out to wrestlers. People say you want to be light on your feet. No, you don't. When everything that I'm talking about makes sense if you break it down. And, when you're light on your feet, you have no stability. You're using your opponent to stand up and control your own body. So we need to definitely change that. And we developed, there's like 5-6 positions that you kind of do. You do with static position, then you can go into 3-inch movements, then you can go into explosive movements through those, and you can use bands, or I got blocks that we developed that is made out of a certain material, and you can use those blocks, and it helps you with your stability and your power. Provisor was on it in 2016 when he was an absolute monster, and it's helped quite a few guys out, and I'd like to get it out to more wrestlers, and they can go on to spikefst.com and look it up and find it. But I do it with my kids in my kids club. At every practice we're doing it right now.
And it's 6 positions, you said?
Yeah, and a lot of different things that you can do from those positions, which is good for coordination. It just connects their whole body. The one thing, when as wrestlers, when you're in a scoring position, a lot of times when we're on legs or we're in a body lock, we're only kind of using our arms instead of using our hips and our legs. And we got to learn to engage as many muscles as possible at point of impact, so you have the stability when you make that impact, plus you get a lot more power generated when you do it.
I'd love to I'll go to the website and check that out, and if you're ever in Chicago, or if I'm ever around you, I'd love to film some of them and put them back out there so people can see them.
Definitely, of course.
Well, Dennis, this has been as exciting and awesome as I thought it would be. Any last words before we sign off here, sir?
No, man, just one thing I want to do is just get kids to try Greco. If you like throwing, give it a try. There's places in the country where you can train it and get good knowledge from. I'm up in Wisconsin, and guys, I run Greco practices pretty much year round now. Trying to get some foreigners up. So once I get those guys up here, I'll be hosting some camps. And one of the guys is, I think, junior medalist, and then the other is might be a junior cadet world champ. So trying to get these guys over here to beat on our guys and teach our guys how to do it.
It's pretty interesting to think about. Those guys wrestle Greco from 8 years old on, and we do it for maybe 3 years. And so you're trying to bridge that gap. I would imagine, even if someone's not in Wisconsin and they want to wrestle Greco, shoot you a message on Facebook.
Shoot
and guys
message,
everywhere.
Exactly. Yep. We'll help you out for sure.
Awesome. Dennis Hall, thanks again, man. You're a treasure.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wrestling Changed My Life. To see video clips from this interview, please go to Instagram at Wrestling Changed My Life. This episode was proudly presented by Spartan Combat. The Spartan Combat Nationals are returning to Jacksonville, Florida, April 8th through the 10th, 2022. Register now at SpartanCombat.com.